Howdy, folks. Today's guest is an old friend of the show. In fact, he's been on so many times, I can practically call him a co-presenter. Right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. I mean, come on, people. You can really help me out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help me get even more amazing guests on the show. Just one click. That's all it takes. One swift second. Just hit that button for me. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, though, let's give it up for today's special guest. The man, the legend, the unrivaled master of the Northern Lights. Give it up for Mr. Dave Williams. Dave, man, what's up?
Yo, what an introduction.
I know.
Master. Nice. I'll take that.
Yeah. That's it. Well, it's true. I mean, yeah.
You good?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, it was just a quick glitch there. Yeah, I'm good.
Your signal all the way up to the Arctic here. But yeah, we'll work with it.
That's it. I'm not even sure whether it's like satellite or undersea cables that deliver the internet signals to where you are.
Probably a bit of everything, to be honest. And then the wireless connection on the end of it as well.
This is actually the thing that almost floored me when we were up there in October last year, was the fact that no matter where we went, like to the most remote region, like we were on some mountain somewhere, miles from tens of miles from any form of civilization, and yet I would get a perfect 5G signal. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
It's good, isn't it? Do you know why? Did I tell you why? I can't remember. But I'll tell you again. So Telenor is the phone provider, but they also run the ship radios. So all the boats out here, the Coast Guard, everyone uses the same Telenor network. So the phones are on the same masts, and therefore, for the boats to have coverage everywhere, the phones also have coverage everywhere, which works out great for me.
Like I said, it's amazing, because I always think I'm driving through the countryside here, only a couple of miles outside of London, one of the biggest, the biggest metropolitan area in Europe, and I'm out of signal. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, even inside London's pretty bad. But yeah, it's cool. It's in stark contrast to reality here, where there's no McDonald's, no Starbucks. The things I always say. It's off the grid. The nearest traffic light is quite some distance away. Life is good. It's a sort of semi-disconnect.
You've been living out there full time now for over a year.
Yeah, I had the luxury of paying to renew a visa recently. So yeah, that was nice.
What does it feel like? I mean, what have you learned in the year that you've lived there now? Is it have all your expectations been met? What's your viewpoint on that now?
In terms of making the decision to come here, it's the best decision I made. I have absolutely no regrets. There have been some hurdles, but those hurdles, although they have, to be honest, they've been pretty big, but they haven't made me change my mind. They've just given me things to think about. I have no regrets at all. This is the right thing. I feel, this is going to sound stupid, I feel like I'm at home, and it's been the first time in a long time that I felt that way. When I was working in London, I was moving around all the time. The place that I was brought up is not the place that my parents are from and have moved back to. I never really felt like I was from somewhere, but I feel home now. It feels right.
What were some of the biggest hurdles that you just described in, about living in or moving to Norway?
There's been some personal and business things which caused the formation of a brand new company. So it worked out being really good, but those things caused me a massive headache when they were happening. But yeah, to solve the problem, not alone, but with the help of one of the kindest people I've met, the guy that owns the resort that I live at. I made this company, and that solved the problems that I had.
Do you now have permanent residency, or do you have to renew a visa every year? How does it work?
I'm a temporary resident, and I think I have to renew it every year. I thought that there was a 3-year situation, but I think looking at it now, it looks like I have to renew it every year. Then by year 5, I can start looking at permanent residence. That involves a citizenship test, like a cultural test, as well as a language test. That's going okay. Like, I understand people speaking Norwegian to me most of the time, but I will still answer in English.
I mean, I've noticed that you seem to have dropped off of Duolingo, because we were like at one point we were like heavy Duolingo competitors.
Yeah, Duolingo was a good start, but it in terms of actual real life progress, I don't think it's that good. But it was a good foundation. It gave the basics, the basic grammar, the basic words that you need. But it doesn't really apply. And it's not necessarily a bad thing about Duolingo. It's more that in Norway there are 2 languages, and further to that, every region has a dialect, which is almost another language in itself. And so up in Lofoten, there's it's Nordnorsk, and it's different to the language people speak in Oslo. Everyone understands each other, but it is different. And so there's no real point in me learning how to speak in Oslo when I live here. And so Duolingo was teaching me as if I was from Oslo.
So it sounds a bit like Birmingham then.
No, I mean, much more extreme. Much more extreme. Honestly, it's almost like another language. You have to think that Norway's only been Norway since 1905. And before then, it was under Swedish rule. And there's been influence throughout history from Denmark, Sweden, and a few other places, I think. So this language it's a Germanic Scandi language. But since 1905, that's when they made it. This is the official language. Before that, each area had a language. Although they were very similar, they were unique languages. So yeah, it's interesting. I'll give you an example. I in Oslo is jag. And you probably recognize something like that from Swedish, right?
Yeah, jag.
Up here, it's ah.
Right.
It's a different word. That is a common thing. It happens all the time. And so while many words are the same, many words are different. So yeah, Duolingo is not that useful. What is useful is people speaking Norwegian to me so that I can listen and take it all in, as long as they have the patience for me to reply in English.
Yeah, I mean, it's, there's a point where immersion is really the best way to learn a language. It's the same when when you finally move to a different country, even if you've learned that language at school, I mean, what you learn at school is basically, schoolboy English, essentially, Yeah, and, the problem is always that the speed at which people speak a language, and just the way that language is being changed just by the everyday use of it, that doesn't correspond with school language textbooks that were written 20 years ago. I mean, I know that, I moved here from Germany in 1996. And even when I go back to Germany, and I would still say my German's fluent, obviously, but it's not as fluent as it was when I lived there. But I have noticed some severe changes in the way the language is spoken just by speaking to my younger cousins, and that's very, very noticeable even in just a quarter of a century, that I've been up here. So it's constantly evolving. And so it's, unless you actually live there and you're immersed in it, it's quite difficult. Let's talk a little bit about your sort of, photographic endeavors. Then we'll get to the new business in a minute, because that's quite exciting too. But when you first, and I know you had been to the Lofoten Islands before you actually permanently moved there, but did you were your expectations did you excel your expectations after since you've lived there in terms of, creating imagery, getting to know the landscape better, getting a better understanding of, the wildlife out there and the seasons? Did that change in any way?
So the reason people take vacations is to get away from the things that they see every day. So what someone sees every day is very special for someone that visits that same place. So people that live in London might hate living in London because they see it every day and want to get away from it. I was really worried that it would be a bit like that, it's the same thing that happened when I took the jump into full-time photography. I thought, am I going to hate photography because I'm doing it because I have to do it rather than because I want to do it? And luckily, I love this place and it hasn't felt like that yet. So when I go for a hike in the mountains, or when I go for an adventure out into one of the fishing villages, or go looking for the Northern Lights, go on moose patrol, any of that stuff, it's still great fun. So I haven't actually, where did I go? I went to Bergen with Russell, but that's the only time I've left since I've been here, and that was 4 days. So yeah, so far so good. No regrets and no change of heart. It still feels like an Arctic paradise. So that's all working quite nicely.
And of course, now you have a buddy to share that with too.
Yeah, Freddie, who I've had to, just took him for a walk a minute ago. I've had to put him in his little house to keep him quiet so that we can talk.
It's the same. It's the same with my dog. I have to put him in the hallway because he's annoying otherwise.
Freddie's a 9 coming on 10-month-old Alaskan Husky. So he's full of energy. He's got a great personality. He's really fun. He's also very demanding.
Is he with you literally 24/7? Because I've seen him. I've seen you take him on tours and.
Yeah, if I'm out on a tour with guests, no, but otherwise, yeah. He goes everywhere and he loves it. It's like a shadow.
Yeah,
but that's fine.
But especially at that age, that's what I found with our dog. He's how old is he now? 4, but he's my wife and my kids have been on holiday. They're coming back later on today, but I've had a week to my own with the dog. So it's it's basically like the house is imagine 2 dudes living together in a house. That's what it looks like. But it's been fun.
I think you should just quickly tell everyone your dog's name.
My dog's name is Solo.
Why?
Well, because there's an affinity for all things Star Wars in this house.
It's like a subtle connection.
Yeah, I mean, he was originally, we were going to call him R2-D2. That was the original plan. And then we would go through different options, and eventually settled on Solo. I mean, my wife, it wasn't a fight, by the way, because my wife's a massive sci-fi fan too. So there was no question that he was going to be named after some form of a sci-fi character. I think we've agreed that the next dog we're going to be called Spock. So we'll just have to keep that balance between Star Wars and Star Trek alive, I think.
Yeah, keep it fair.
Yeah, keep it fair. Exactly. That's it. Now, I mentioned it earlier, or you mentioned it earlier. You've got a new business venture. Let's talk about that. Give me sort of a helicopter view over what it is.
Subtle little hints here to give away that there's a new company in town.
Yes, it's called Lofoten Insights.
Yeah.
Just give us a little helicopter view over.
This is a photo guiding company, basically. That's the really, really short description. So it maximizes on my experience as a photographer and somebody who knows Lofoten from all the time I've spent here, the best photo spots, how to get the best photos of those photo spots that are quite often overshot, and of course the Northern Lights. So I offer day tours to photographers and non-photographers, so people that either just want to see the place or are full on into photography that want me to put them in the right spot so they can just take the photo of the good stuff. The market is interesting. So there's people coming in, staying in fancy hotels. There's people coming from cruise ships. There's people coming specifically for photography. But then there's a few other things. People want the experiences. So I also offer the Sami reindeer experience, which you've done. Did you like it?
I loved it. I mean, how can you not love it? It's reindeer. They're awesome.
Exactly. Feed the reindeer, stroke the reindeer, or pet the reindeer, hear the Sami stories around the fire. We also have a midnight sun kayaking tour. So people go to the north side of the island where the midnight sun shines, go kayaking. And in just a few weeks, the Northern Lights season will start. What's looking to be a pretty good season, with solar maximum being basically now. NASA hasn't officially said it, but it's basically now. The sun is more active. The sun has more sunspots, which tends to cause more activity for Northern Lights. So everything's go. Yesterday I had a 14-hour day with 3 tours. This evening I have one thing to do after this and our other meeting. So it's off to a flying start. And in fact, this morning I had a meeting with the local newspaper because they wanted to hear what this company is all about as well. So yeah, it's really good. But then there's other elements to it. So one of the things that I've had to do is basically become a taxi driver. So in order to drive people around legally with the full insurance and everything legit, I have had to take taxi tests, so theory and practical tests, obtain a taxi license in Norway, which is interesting because that wasn't like a high priority, thinking, what am I going to have to do when I go there? The van, the Volkswagen Transporter or Caravelle, depending on where you're from, is registered as a taxi. Everything it's quite a challenge to do this kind of business. But now it's all done and ready, which means that I can legally and responsibly cater to photographers who are looking to attend workshops, and they can do that with things I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, or photographers that want to lead workshops. I can facilitate that. And then there's another element, which is the business-to-business work. So I can use my experience as a photographer, and of course have used my experience as a photographer to shoot for businesses. So I was doing an event at a hotel recently the other day, just across the water. I'm expanding my 360 work to get local companies onto Google Street View and to do 360 virtual tours with the collaborations I have with Insta360. So this, when I summed it up by saying this is a photo guiding company, that's a very, very brief summary of what actually happens in this business, which is basically me, just me. So one of my ambitions is to find another photographer and another van as fast as possible when this work's rolling and the money's coming in, because otherwise I'm going to be buried.
Yeah. It's always a problem, especially when you start a business as a one-man band, and then you get to the point where you're going to have to hire in help at some point.
Yeah. Got to time it right, make it make financial sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have to learn the knowledge? Did you have to get the knowledge for your taxi license?
It's basically the theory test is it's like your regular driving theory test, and then there's some extra questions which relate specifically to taxis or carrying people, carrying goods. And then the practical driving test, I went to another city nearby and had to do 5 different routes. So like the driving examiner, a regular driving examiner, said, okay, you're picking 2 people up from the airport, go and get them. Well, okay, so he's looking at my manner of driving, the route I took to get there. With Norway's situation at the moment with electric vehicles, they were looking at how eco-friendly my driving was. So was I in the right gear, doing the right speed and all that sort of stuff? to minimize emissions. And obviously then there was things like, can you put this person in a wheelchair in the car? Can you fit this child seat in the car? All that sort of stuff that I'm never going to do. But that was what the test was. So yeah, okay, no problem.
Well, you say 5 different routes, probably relatively straightforward. There's only like 5 roads on the island.
No, this was over on the main. So there was a train station and everything. It was. I think there's even a Burger King over there.
Really?
Yeah. The real world, across the water.
Yes. There you go. So let's come back to what you're offering to to participants or clients when it comes to workshops. So you said on one hand, it's an opportunity for photographers to create their own or run their own workshops out there. Yeah. And then at the same time, of course, it's a great way for enthusiasts to take part in one of your workshops. What can people expect when they take part in a photo workshop out there? Well,
this is one of those kind of competition-winning locations. It's ready to be photographed. To be honest, you can drop your camera in Lofoten and end up with a pretty good picture. The mountains are stunning. The entire landscape is stunning. It's packed full of history, but then every season is different. And there's wildlife that comes and goes. So sometimes you'll find some moose. Sometimes the moose have big antlers. Sometimes you'll find whales, migratory birds. There's all that sort of element of wildlife. And then, of course, seasonally, you have the northern lights. You have them in autumn or fall, and then you have them in the full snow of winter. And then you have them again in the spring. And then in summer, you get the midnight sun. So you get 24 hours of 24 hours of daylight for about 5 weeks. And at the moment, the sun sets, where are we? 2 weeks ago. And it's still light for another 2 weeks or so. Then it starts to get dark enough to see the northern lights. The northern lights are obviously there. It's just whether you can see them or not, whether it's dark enough. But in 2 weeks, it will be dark. I'm hoping it might be dark enough sooner, or they might be strong enough to overpower the slight dusk. That's a word. Sooner than that, but I'm ready. But yeah, I mean, it's an iconic place. There's so many Instagram famous spots: Hamno Bridge, the orange cabins at Sakrisoy, the whole of Nusfjord, which is a UNESCO site. Then there's the boathouse on Rambo. But there's all these places that make this place recognizable. So you know you're going to get a good picture. The challenge comes with getting a good picture that no one else has got, which ultimately comes down to the conditions. And there's not a lot else you can change. For example, Hamno Bridge, the cabins on the island with the big mountain behind them, it's iconic. Everyone's picture is the same because it's a bridge. You have to stand on the bridge. You have no other option. So the challenge comes to how wide do you shoot? Do you do a long exposure and get the waves over the rocks turning into milk? How high do you shoot? Do you do a panorama sideways? If you're shooting at night, there's streetlights on the bridge, which means you can only face forwards anyway, because otherwise you're going to get glare. There's all this stuff, which makes you have to think about how you're going to defeat, as you know, we call it the Eiffel Tower effect. You're going to defeat the influences and get something that other people haven't got.
It's, as always, it's this trap where you sort of think, I need to get that shot because you've seen it a million times. And of course, all you're doing is you're just copying the same thing that everybody else, has already shot. And then it doesn't really necessarily make it special anyway. It's, I mean, from my own experience,
but it's not going to stand out.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can do that. And there's something satisfying in it. It's almost like a sort of a self-evaluation where you think like, I can do that too. But then I think the next step after that is, okay, well, now how can I do something that's uniquely mine or something that is unique in some way? That's what makes that makes a difference. I spoke to Matthew Brown, who I think in connection with Skylum, but I spoke to him last week, and he's just released a book of London street photography. And the thing that really struck me with that was that, of course, I recognize all the locations, in the photos, but he's really managed to get some really unique angles, where you just think, oh yeah, I never really thought about that, but that's a really cool idea. And of course, my first thought then is like, oh, I'm going to have to go down there and try that myself. And then I was actually almost correct myself, thinking, well, no, it's already been done, so I'm going to find something else. But it's a great way, to get your creative mind rolling.
Yeah, it's interesting. And let's go back. I call it the Eiffel Tower effect. The reason is the Eiffel Tower is the most photographed landmark in the world. So it's been shot to death. Every angle has been covered, which means it's probably one of the hardest things to come up with a new angle of, or a new photo that people haven't seen before. So that's why I call it the Eiffel Tower effect, because that applies to various other things. And the more popular things become, which is generally because of Instagram or social media anyway, it's the influencer effect. Someone sees something and everyone suddenly wants to be there. It causes you to have to think about your photography. You can't just point your camera in the rough general direction of something beautiful. You have to make that shot special if you want it to stand out in your portfolio, or stand out on a stock website, or to sell to a client in a different way. That's the only way to do it now, because otherwise everyone's got that same shot and they're two a penny, because there are too many. What's the word? The word is not photographer. The word is camera owner. There are too many camera owners out there willing to give their work away for nothing, which devalues the photographers out there that are trying to make a living doing photography. Interesting.
Yes, and I'm just, on the flip side, you could say, well, but even if there is a mass of people who want to just recreate these iconic shots in these iconic locations, then of course, in a sense, they're perfect clients for you then at the same time.
Yeah. I can put them in front of the right thing at the right time. That's easy. And then if they want to come up with something different, we'll help them do that. Similarly, if they want me to take a picture of them in front of the pretty thing, I'll do that.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So when did your new company become operational?
The company's existed for a little while now, but while I was getting everything ready, it was kind of under wraps. While I was, building the website and getting the relationships going with various providers and all that stuff. So it's probably been about 2 weeks now that I've been official. And everything's sort of working out just right. It's building momentum. There are bookings coming in. The bookings are in the future. So at the moment, I'm sometimes busy, sometimes bored. But I'm using that bored downtime to, again, maximize on the future. So once everything gets rolling the way it should be, then hopefully it'll just be busy every day. I'll just have to keep this ticking over. But yeah, it's been just a couple of weeks now, and everything's sort of picking up pace exactly as it should be.
So when you book on a tour, then of course presumably you're going to have to find somewhere to stay. You're going to have to stay yourself, and you have to get around whilst you're there. Are you helping clients to organize all of those conditions too?
I've just put together a quote for Adobe, because they've asked to come and stay and have a meeting and go and do some fun stuff, which sounds like a good idea to me, rather than being cooped up in the office. So it involves working with other providers for the things that I don't do. So like the boats or, whatever else it might be. And then, of course, the accommodation. So I work very closely with Svinaya, which is, I think it's the biggest Rover resort, I think. Certainly, if not, it's one of the biggest, but it's definitely the best. It's historic red fishermen's cabins and some modern houses and apartments as well on this island right beside Svolvær. So you're close enough to the restaurants, grocery store, shopping center, pharmacies. You're close to all of that, but you're far enough away, just over the bridge, but you're far enough away that it's a little piece of paradise. And memorializes the fishing history of this whole area. It is still a working area, so there are two fish factories, a fish net repair place, fish drying racks, all of that good stuff. And this little Arctic resort of Fen. So when someone comes and they want an entire package, together we make all of that happen.
And when you say there's a shopping center and shops and stuff, it's not like a city type situation. It is, there is a shopping mall, that's true, but it is still within. I would call it a village, really. Yeah.
Locally, it's a city. It's got 4,500 residents, and we just got a new sports shop, which is cool. Ooh. And the supermarket moved, so big news.
Really?
Oh yeah. But what is there? There's cafes, restaurants, a couple of pubs, clothes shops, kitchen shops. There's a Klaus Olsen. There's an L shop, which is like electronics, so like Currys or Dixons or whatever. They don't exist anymore, do they?
Currys does, yeah. It's
Currys, Norway edition. There's a stationery shop. I'm running out of. There's a health food shop. Running out of things. there's enough. There's just enough stuff. Just enough.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff.
There's no stuff. There's none of that. But there's just enough stuff to make it all work.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely plenty of stuff to for you to spend some weeks there. Really, absolutely no problem. I mean, there's enough stuff for you to live there. Obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, like some stuff you can't find, but the internet exists. I just have to wait like a week for it to get here.
Yeah.
Like I looked at IKEA the other day, for example, and I was looking at a desk in IKEA, and the price of the delivery was twice as much as the actual desk.
Oh wow!
So that sometimes that sort of thing happens, but otherwise everything's fine. Just enough to work.
Where is the nearest IKEA from? Is it in Sweden?
Maybe Tromsø. So if I were to drive there, that would be 8 hours.
Could be worth it, I'm guessing. I mean, most people won't travel to the Lofoten Islands to go to IKEA, so so it shouldn't be that big of a problem.
The country's basically split in half in that sense. Even like with the power grid, there's a power grid in the north and a power grid in the south. If you live down in Oslo, Bergen, Stavanger, anywhere down there in the south, everything just works as if it does in the UK or America or whatever. Up here in the north, different story. This is the end of the road. This is a little bit too difficult. So the post comes 2 or 3 times a week. I have an app that tells me when.
Okay.
The supermarket deliveries is a slight premium in price because we're at the end of the road. They have to make a bit of an effort to bring the stock here, and the stock is very limited. It's not difficult, but it's not what you'd be used to in a city. That's for sure. But that's part of the fun. Like I haven't like really missed anything so badly that I don't want to be here because it's not available in the shop, or there's always a solution. And that's kind of what life is about. There's no problems. There's only solutions.
No, I mean that's absolutely true. It's such a beautiful environment. You just you wouldn't expect there to be all the amenities that you would have in a big city either. That's another thing. I always find out when I visit my mom in the south of Germany, they're in a tiny town out in the sticks. Like you have to get in the car and drive for quite a long while to get to all the things that I would be used to here, but it doesn't matter because that's not the point of living there. Or certainly from my perspective, that's absolutely not the point of like visiting there. Germany, of course, a lot of things are different. Like shops are closed on Sundays, for example. They're just shut down on Saturday afternoons, and that is it. So if you haven't done your shopping, by Saturday afternoon, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Now that I've lived in the UK for 25 years, I find that outrageous. What do you mean? I can't go shopping? I can't do my grocery shopping on a Sunday? That's outrageous. But of course, when you live there, it's a different thing. It just doesn't matter. None of it matters.
Yeah, you get used to it. And
absolutely,
there are parts of the UK where it's harder than it is here.
Yeah.
For example, my parents, their nearest sort of proper town is about an hour, 40 minutes to an hour away. If they want to go to a shopping centre or if they want to go to a big supermarket rather than the little local one. So yeah, there are parts of the UK where it's harder than it is here. This is nothing. This is paradise. I'm looking out the window. Every time I look over here, I'm looking out the window at the sea in that island, thinking, yep, this is good. It's quiet.
Yeah.
There's been one noise. I don't know if you've heard it. The window's open. There's been one noise, and it was a seagull. That was it.
Right.
This is good.
Exactly. That's really what makes that place so beautiful. So, if you are looking for a beautiful, location to, experience life in a completely different way, the Lofoten Islands are definitely the perfect location. And of course, with that, come photographic opportunities. The one thing I like about places like that is that there are considerably fewer distractions as well. And so it basically means you can concentrate on things like your photography, much more intensely than if you're constantly distracted by just general disruptions in life.
Yeah, that's true. There's if I wanted to sit down, obviously there's, with running a company and stuff, there's always deadlines and things to deal with and people to get back to. But on the whole, if I want to sit down and do something, I can. If I want to go out and do something, I can. And there's shiny things around, and I get distracted by shiny things quite easily. But there's nothing really preventing anything or making anything impossible to happen.
Yeah.
It kind of puts you back in control, especially after working 9 to 5 or whatever office type job, or working a day job for someone else, making money for someone else. It's quite freeing.
And I mean,
my pace up here as well has slowed down, and I'm certainly getting it. I was really unfit when I came. I'm getting fitter. There's all the good stuff is happening. And I used to get headaches all the time. I haven't had a headache for so long. There's just all these little things that you don't necessarily think about often that are the benefits of being in a place like this.
Yeah. And slowing down is super important. I'm experiencing that myself recently by shooting film. So what I did was I took myself into Chinatown in London a couple of days ago with a friend of mine, and we basically decided to shoot one roll of Kodak color film, which in my case, medium format, means 12 shots that day in Chinatown. So the idea was, it's different, it's colorful. It was a great day. So all the colors were really, popping, but I only had 12 shots. And we spent 6 hours in Chinatown trying to get these 12 shots, and you really have to slow down. It's so different from digital photography in so many ways. I don't even know how to start to describe it. A good example is, let's say you see a great background, right? Like a street corner with some, with Chinese restaurants or shops or supermarkets and, lanterns and you're waiting for the perfect subject to move through the frame. First of all, you just have one shot. And also, you just have to sit and wait for that person to walk through, and you just have one shot with it.
Said that. That's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard in photography. And I can't remember who said it, but basically, instead of going and looking for the subject, look for the background and wait for the subject to appear.
Yeah.
That's exactly the way to do it.
And then, of course, you can't just, set your camera to burst mode and then just burst the heck out of it and shoot 200 photos of that person walking through your frame. You just have one frame. And the whole experience is so different. everything moves slowly. Like I was trying to, there's a rickshaw that was coming through, and I thought, was good. That's a great subject. I need to take a shot of that. By the time I set up the viewfinder, by the time you have to measure for exposure, right? Mm-hmm. So by the time I'd gotten the thing to focus, it was gone. You can't even react quickly to anything. It's a very, very different experience. But the interesting thing is, despite the fact that Chinatown is probably one of the busiest parts of inner London, and even now it's high tourist season. Of course, you've got masses and masses of tourists basically, visiting Chinatown, and even in all of that hustle and bustle, which would normally do my head in, because I had to move and operate so slowly, it just slowed everything down, and I came out of it thinking, it's interesting. I'm not feeling stressed out at all. Normally, in an environment like that, give me half an hour and I'll be a stress ball, but not at all, because I had to just move slowly and and literally do everything in slow motion. I came out of it actually feeling quite relaxed, I have to say, which was a really interesting experience.
Is it something you're going to do again?
Yeah, it's actually it's something I thought it was really fun. And I thought I'd do something like that to start with, maybe in different parts of London, because London is a really it's a very versatile city visually. You've got places like Chinatown, which is very unique. Then you've got places like the old London, Victorian London. But then you've got the super modern, concrete and steel banking district, in Canary Wharf and stuff. And so there are loads and loads of opportunities to create these mini shoots. And it literally is just one roll. So you've got 12 shots. That's it. Part of it is because it's fun. Part of it is because it's a real challenge not to rely on digital technology. I mean, you've got to do, in everything, if something goes wrong, it's down to you. It's like, if it's out of focus, you can't blame technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because we're so used to, even when we shoot in manual mode, it's not too difficult most of the time, but quite often people are shooting in aperture priority or shutter priority, and the camera is doing the heavy weight, the heavy work.
Yeah.
So to make the photographer do the thinking again, I guess it identifies the gaps in your knowledge as well. So it shows you what you need to work on.
That's definitely true, but it's also, it's one of these things where I would say something that was necessary knowledge many years ago, 40, 50, 60 years ago, that's now less necessary because we have the technology to take that heavy lifting off of us. In that respect, it's a challenge. I mean, for me, the thing about film photography is it's almost like I'm comparing myself to my dad and my grandma, who used to exclusively shoot on film and obviously shot on cameras that didn't even have autofocus or anything like that, let alone built-in light meters or anything like that. And I always, maybe there's a little part of me sometimes that thinks I just feel like a loser because I rely on all these all of these technologies when really I just want to prove to myself that I can actually take some halfway decent photographs, and I don't know whether I can or not because I haven't developed the film yet. So I shall see when that happens.
Let me know.
Yeah, I mean it'll be interesting. It's an interesting thing. So it shows you what the limitations are of the technology that you're working with, because there are some massive limitations. But as always, limitations are good in order for you to challenge your own creativity. I always find that operating within limitations is actually the best way that you can challenge your own creativity in that respect.
Yeah. It means you have to identify and overcome any problems that are based on those limitations. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is find a sneaky shortcut to remove or reducing the effect of those limitations, which is we want to do things in the easiest, simplest, laziest way. Who said that? It was Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, one of the two, who said that if you want a difficult task doing, you find the laziest person in the room, because then they'll do it in the cheapest, most cost-effective, most straightforward way. They'll find the easiest way to do it.
Well, absolutely. And the thing is, like I said, it's like a personal challenge. It's also it teaches you acceptance. Sometimes you just have to accept that you cannot get that shot. And that's a lot harder with digital cameras than it is with film. Film very quickly teaches you that you just can't. There's no way you can get that shot, because you're just limited in you can't expose for it. Forget about it, because you can't just ramp up the ISO. That's not happening. Yeah. So you can. Yeah, you can't. You can't rely on eye autofocus. That's not happening. I mean, it's hard. But what did Kennedy say? We're not sending people to the moon because it's easy. We're doing it because it is hard. And that's kind of a fun part, So and now I'm thinking this might be an opportunity to shoot the Lofoten Islands on film.
What might be interesting is trying to recreate historical pictures on film.
One of the interesting things that I found with the camera that I'm using is, once I've run the first roll of film through it, and I established that the thing actually still works, because that's a thing, because you can easily get light leaks where the seals are wrecked, or the thing might, mechanically not be sound or whatever. But you very quickly figured it out once you put a roll of film through it and just look at the results. So in my case, the results came back absolutely fine. It's just interesting to look at those pictures and go like, oh, wow, that is actually, in a weird way, that's the classic film look. And you go, well, yeah, it's no surprise. There isn't it's not a preset. It's actually.
Yeah, interesting. Like there's probably no presets available that you can. I tell you what I find really fascinating is Photoshop and its history in the darkroom. Where people say, everything's Photoshopped nowadays. Well, everything was Photoshopped on film. Everything was manipulated, and there was post-processing techniques to lighten and then darken and enhance and remove things. That's all been there for a very long time. But when you look at how it used to work in the darkroom, Photoshop is just a digital version of something that already existed that obviously then developed into being something bigger. But it's always been the case that people have manipulated their photos. And so it annoys me. Firstly, the use, like I did that with Photoshopped. The use of the word Photoshop as a verb annoys me, but sometimes you just have to. Just to make points or get your point across. But it's fascinating how that's always been a thing. On film, you look at some of the world's most famous photos, and then you look at how they were processed in the darkroom. It was basically Photoshop before Photoshop. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, and very effectively, because, as I always remind people, like Photoshop came about in, 1994 or something along those lines, mid-90s.
80s.
Something like that. But, you can always remind people that, there used to be magazine covers in the decades before that, in the 70s and, and 60s and whatever. The vast majority of those images are not straight out of camera. Yeah. There's a lot of work that has been done on or to them, in the darkroom beforehand. That used to be a thing. But again, it's a skill. It's an interesting skill that I also don't possess in any way, shape, or form, But nevertheless, it's an interesting skill. I find the whole when it comes to film, I find the whole process really quite fascinating. I developed my first roll of film myself a few weeks ago, and it's it's just that sense of satisfaction when you take the developed rollout and you unwind the negative and you see that there's actually something on it. I mean, it's actually worked like magic. It's like, what happened here? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's an interesting process that I've come to like quite a lot. It's not the cheapest hobby, I gotta say that.
Well, I popped into, I guess you'd call it a used camera shop in Bergen with Osman when I was down there. He wanted to look at something. He wanted some film or something as well. Or like the numbers attached to those things. I know Norway's expensive anyway, but even so, the numbers attached to those things, the ones that work, was phenomenal. Like the ones that don't work, like I've got maybe 10 or 11 up here, up on the shelf beside me. They're not expensive. The ones that still work, yeah, it's an investment.
Yeah, and it's not only the cameras themselves; it's also the film. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you'd buy, boxes of 35 millimeter film, and it would like, I don't know, eight rolls in the box or something like that. And it would be, I don't know, not a lot of money, right? You could buy them anywhere, like at the supermarket. They used to sell that stuff at like Tesco's or whatever. You could buy it at in a drugstore like Boots over here in the UK. No whatever else. They weren't expensive. They charged you the money when you had them developed, but actually up front, the film wasn't expensive. Now it's outrageous.
Wasn't Kodak one of the world's biggest companies?
Yeah, it was. And very interesting. I mean, the whole story of Kodak's demise is very interesting as well. But,
Like, do you want a digital camera? No. Do you want a digital camera? No. Yes.
Yeah. It's never going to catch on. It's never going to catch on. But yeah, but even earlier, the whole instant, the whole sort of Polaroid instant thing, that's never going to catch on. Oh, it does. Yeah. Oh well. There you go. That's a subject for a completely. So if people coming back to Lofoten Insight, if people are interested in checking out what you offer, where can they go?
Well, everything that was there before is still there. So idavewilliams.com or at idavewilliams is still there, but Lofoten Insight has an identity of its own, of course. So at Lofoten Insight, lofoteninsight.com, looking for Lofoten Insight on Facebook, on Google. If you attended one of my tours or workshops, I'd love you to help me out with a review on Google or Facebook. Get your guide via tour, TripAdvisor. This is the market I'm in now. We're everywhere, but it's Lofoten Insight on social media or lofoteninsight.com.
And of course, you find all the links in the description below. If you're watching this on YouTube, they'll be in the description of the YouTube video. If you're listening on audio, they'll be in the episode description. So make sure you check them out there. And if you have any experience with Dave's previous workshops, then make sure you leave a review there and a little 5-star rating, because that always helps. And likewise, as I'm saying that, of course, if you're listening to this podcast, give us a little review or give us a star rating or something like that, because or leave a comment. That's it. Like and subscribe. Yeah, ring that bell. Blah blah blah. All of that good stuff. Anyway, Dave, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show again. I said you're sort of turning into the co-presenter because actually, you are the guest with the highest number of appearances.
Thank you very much for having me. Anyway, I've got Norway stuff to do now. It's very good to be back on the show. Thank you very much. Thanks for helping out with Lofoten Insight. And if anyone wants a bit more info, give me a shout.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. It was awesome having Dave on the show. As always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. If you want to know what we got up to last October during our Northern Lights and Viking workshop, then just go and check out episode 172 and all will be revealed. I'm sure you'll love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us continue creating and bring you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fleshed video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? Well, all you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camerashake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, like I mentioned earlier, just drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. Thank you for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.